Today, my guest is Nicole O'Dell.
They need to talk about issues with their preteens and teenagers well before they face them in school.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. Today, my guest is Nicole O'Dell. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, you are a radio host. Why don't you tell us about that?
I founded Choose Now Ministries, and part of the ministry approach we have there is my radio programs called Choose Now Radio, and I have Parent Talk and Teen Talk, and we deal with tough issues and help parents and teens broker the communication on those tough issues.
And those are online.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. You can find everything about that at choosenowradio.com.
choosenowradio.com. Today we're here to talk about your books, the Hot Buttons books. Now this is a series. I have two of them here.
These are the first two?
The Internet Edition and the Dating Edition.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us the goal of this series?
The whole point is to encourage parents and to actually convince parents that they need to talk about issues with their preteens and teenagers well before they face them in school. Lay the foundation, broker that understanding between what the parent wants the kids to know and to do and to commit to good choices between that and the peer pressure they're going to be facing, and how difficult it can be if they're not prepared to make those good choices. So the Hot Buttons books, it not only convince the parents they need to do it early, but give them the tools and the scripting to actually have those conversations.
One of the things I noticed, I don't remember which of these books it was in, you were talking about how when parents are talking to their teens, then they're not supposed to be trying to be like their best buddy.
Right.
And not try and be like the teen, dress like the teen, that kind of thing. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you find parents, and we know that we don't want to be their best friend, but we find parents trying to relate to them on their level and use the same words and try to act like they get it and they're trendy and they're up to date. I'm sorry, by the time I hear the words and I understand what they mean and use them appropriately, there's a new one. So it's not authentic. Our kids want us to be authentic. They want us to be parents. They want the boundaries. They want us to put in the time. And sometimes parents say, my kids aren't interested in what I have to say. They roll their eyes. They don't listen. But it takes time. It takes going after that issue, going after that conversation many, many times before you break through that wall. And we have to be willing as parents to take that extra step and push through and keep going. We're the ones who have to overcome those boundaries. We can't blame it on our teenagers and wait for them to drop the walls. We have to knock them down.
One of the things we have to realize is they are not either little adults or big children.
That's right.
They really are in between.
Right.
In a lot of ways, they're still children, and in a lot of ways, they are almost adult. And
yeah. And many parents say, I hope I make it through the teen years. I just want to get through the teen years. And they put their head in the sand and they hope everyone comes out on the other side healthy and, pretty much unscathed. But I believe these years are the ones that are we have the opportunity to shape our teenagers and help them grow into the adults they're going to be, and the parents they're going to be to our grandkids. And that's a huge responsibility, and they can't raise themselves.
Right, and it is the final preparation for their adulthood.
Right.
So it's a really important time. And also, it can be a time when you really can develop a more adult friendship with your children.
And the hormonal changes and the life changes their bodies are going through, and the new responsibilities they're taking on with jobs and considering the possibilities of their future. There's so much happening in those years. How can we let them navigate all of that on their own?
Yeah, I mean, we've been through growing up, and we struggled.
Yes.
The struggles are different. And you also mentioned, don't every time something comes up, tell them the story of your life, because that's not what they're dealing with necessarily right now. And if they want to hear your stories, great, but you don't want to automatically do that. I thought that was good advice.
You can share things, obviously, from your past, but watch for cues. Sometimes that's going to be when they're going to roll their eyes and say, oh, she just doesn't get it. It's different. And so you have to watch for those cues. And you can even ask. You can come right out and say, do you want to hear about my experiences with this? What's wrong with that? Then they can answer and tell you, no, it has nothing to do with what I'm going through, or you just don't get it. Well, then don't push that that part of the issue.
And if they say yes, then
you have an open door.
That's good. That's good. Well, where did you get the idea for the strategic scenarios that you use in these books?
Well, I actually started this with my kids. It was a dinner table type game we played, and I would throw out a scenario, and it's basically a fiction little story, and I put them in the middle of a hot button situation with a choice. And then I would give them 4 or 5 choices. What would you do when this happens? And this will probably happen to you, so what's your choice? And they would think about it and make a decision, and then we could talk about what they said. And it would not only give us the opportunity to talk about that issue, but it helped me see how they think.
Oh, that's good.
And
how did you keep it from being like in a classroom where, okay, the teacher's asking you the question and am I getting the right answer? How did you keep it from feeling like that?
Where they might just say what they think I want to hear.
Yeah.
It takes a couple of times for them to realize they're not going to get in trouble, and they're not being judged, and you have to craft the scenario in a way that makes it difficult to where they might say, I would never take drugs, but if you craft it in a way that it's something kind of benign, it seems like the sniffing markers. If you put it to your kids, what would you do if somebody said, hey, here, smell this is really cool, and you take a big whiff of that marker, and then it's part of that culture that's happening in our schools, and they need to be aware that those circumstances will arise. She's not in trouble. They're not in trouble for saying, yeah, I would probably sniff it, but now we can talk about what the effects are and why sniffing things like that and inhalants are so dangerous as other drugs, and even more so because it feels safe.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's all covered in the drug edition of Hot Buttons.
Okay, good. Well, you're a mom of 6
I am.
children.
Yes.
How do you do it?
It's busy. My oldest is 20. He's off in the Air Force, and my youngest are 3-year-old triplets.
Triplets?
Yes. So we've got 2 in the middle. So we're coming at it from all angles.
So when you found out that you were going to be having triplets and you already had these other children that you were raising, how did that feel?
It was scary. At first, the biggest hurdle was the pregnancy. I just needed to make sure everyone was safe and healthy on the other side of that. And then we had a lot to deal with after everyone came home, and I'm looking at these 6 children and thinking, okay, now what?
So were your other children old enough to help a little bit? Oh, that's good.
I think 9 and 11 were the girls, and then my son was pretty much out of the house by then. So,
wow,
yeah,
triplets. So, why is it better for parents to discuss the issues before the issues actually come up?
It's that whole idea of if you are standing face to face with peer pressure, you've got popularity on the line, you've got bullying situations, all these things that are pressuring the choice, not to mention just basic human desire to experiment and the battle of temptation, and you're not prepared. What do you expect the teenager in that moment, or preteen, to be able to rationalize all of these issues and sort through them and come up with the godly response and face the peer pressure with that response? It's a lot to ask.
That is a lot to ask.
So if we get there first and lay that foundation with the knowledge we want them to carry about that issue, and give them the tools so they're prepared with their answer, they stand a much better chance of being able to stand against that peer pressure.
Do you incorporate scripture in your training with your children?
Absolutely. And let's take the sexuality edition. From that issue, we talked about homosexuality. Our kids are learning about this in school because parents aren't talking to them about it. So their first experience with the concept of homosexuality is an attitude of tolerance, and that's the way it's presented to them. So then mom and dad have to do some backpedaling from there. So my recommendation is get there first, and I give the tools, I lay it all out. Here's what it is. Here, this is why it happens. This is what people say. This is what the world says. This is what God says. Now this is what you're going to encounter. When you shine light on darkness, it's not dark anymore. It's exposed.
Okay. And I'm sure you also talk to them about loving the people
Absolutely.
who are involved in all
I have a
this.
whole section on can a homosexual person be a Christian? And my answer is, I sure hope so, because if not, then I can't, and you can't, and none of us, it's, so they have to have a healthy outlook on what grace and love and forgiveness is, but we have to give them the tools to understand what God calls a Christian.
So what it is basically, I could be a liar or a thief or a murderer or something, but if I become a believer, I can't keep being a liar or a thief or a murderer.
At some point, God works through all of those things in a person, and Philippians 1:6 says that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. It's not over.
Right.
So
yeah,
at some
still
point,
have
whatever it is.
Thank God for grace.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I mention,
Yes.
in the back of each book, each Hot Buttons book, there's a section, it's 3 parts, and it walks the family through forgiveness and confession and forgiveness and a clean slate. And it's not just the teenagers, this involves the parents too, because sometimes maybe they haven't been modeling the behavior in front of their teenager they expect from their teenager. So sometimes by confessing to your kids and saying, you know what, I haven't modeled good dating choices, I haven't modeled good internet security or choices on the internet, or I haven't modeled good substance issues if there's a lot of alcohol in the home, or whatever the beliefs are on that. Confessing that and treating it like you respect your child enough to say, hey, I get it, I messed up and I haven't done this well, forgive me, now let's move forward. And then walking the teenagers through the same thing. And each book does that for the particular issue.
Is it going to be a total of 4 books?
6, possibly 8, and definitely a mobile app.
Oh, okay. And what are the other 2 that you haven't mentioned?
Bullying and self-image. Self-image is things like eating disorders and reputation and peer
Bullying
pressure.
seems like one of the toughest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's difficult to pinpoint who the target is, and it's difficult to identify why the bullying happens. So you do more of a reactive than a proactive with bullying. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the goal of Hot Buttons is to be proactive, not reactive.
Give parents
Get
the
there
tools
first.
they need so they can prepare their teens.
Right.
Well, where can they find you online with these
Yeah,
books?
NicoleO'Dell.com has everything, and there's a section on my website for Hot Buttons, and you can actually, pretty much maybe 3 times a month, I post a new strategic scenario, and that's free. You can just use it and
That's great.
apply it.
Now, the O'Dell, on the book, it has the apostrophe. It doesn't have that.
No, it's just straight NicoleO'Dell.com,
Okay.
and then ChooseNowRadio.com. Those are the radio shows.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being my
Appreciate
guest.
it. Had a great time.